Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing Ms. Francine Nix. She's the Chief of Contracting at the Enterprise Service Division for the NETCENTS-2 program. Francine has been with NETCENTS since 2002. She was the primary contracting officer responsible for awarding the NETCENTS-2 products contract. And you better listen up because her portfolio includes $24 billion. So with that, Francine.
So, good morning. They have told me to stand behind this podium because they're recording, okay? So, I'm going to try to stay here. It's good to be here. I've been to San Antonio. It's been quite a long time since I've been here, so it's good to be back. And I stumbled upon the Riverwalk last night, so anyway, I only have an hour, and I hope y'all are good to me and you don't have too many questions. But anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. So this is an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about app services, NetOps. I'm going to use that lingo because I think that's what you're familiar with. Products, of course, like you said, I awarded the products contract, and as you know, it was protested 3 different times. So I've gone through that, and that's quite painful. But we're on the other side of that, and we hope you're having great success using our contracts. Clean structure, market research, subcontracting. What's not there is a limitation on subcontracting, that clause. We'll talk about that. The use of the full and open contracts versus the small business contracts. The RFP procedures at the task order level, the GPC, and of course, AFWay. And I'm not going to talk too in depth about AFWay. I think I've got like 2 slides. So if you got any questions on that, feel free to call our office or send us an email, and we will get back to you. So having said that, we'll go ahead and move on to app services. Of course, app services, there's 2 separate IDIQ vehicles. There's the full and open, and of course, the small business contract. One was awarded in 2012 and the other one in 2015. The total value, the ceiling of both of those contracts comes to about $1.92 billion. So that's $960 million for each contract. And we do have cleans for all of the contract types, and of course you do your ordering via AFWay. And the NAICS code, now I have a little something up there because we get quite a lot of calls about the NAICS code. Of course, when you're doing your task order, you have to use the same NAICS code that we have used against the IDIQ. Now, we didn't say that. The Code of Federal Regulations states that you have to use the same for task orders issued against a multiple award vehicle. You have to use the same NAICS code that we have applied, which represents the preponderance of work that we thought at the IDIQ level that we were going to receive. So even if you got a NAICS code that you know is better, and believe me, some COs, they're type A, they call us, they argue, and they say that don't apply. The statutes and the law says you have to use it. So anyway, now I have that on each of the slides. I'm not going to say that again. But please use the NAICS code that's assigned to the IDIQ vehicle. And it's not just a NETCENTS thing. You know, this is for any multiple award vehicle that you're using. So the IDIQ, the ordering period is 7 years if we exercise all of those options. The task order period of performance, of course, you know, that's limited to 5 years for task orders that you issue. You need to cite that performance period in all of your orders that you place, as well as we got one little unique thing. There's a clause that we have in the contract when we placed it, when we put it in place, that states if you put a task order in place on the last day of the ordering period of the IDIQ, that you can get 3 years of performance out of it, thus making the IDIQ a 10-year contract. So. And I'm going to wait for someone to ask me the question, but anyway, that's where we are today. That's how our contract stands today, okay? Now, if you got any questions, please feel free to ask me the question while we're on the slide. Any questions so far on what I've gone over? Yes, sir. Could you hang on?
What was it? On the contract that, or when we've been working through NetCents, the NAICS code that I thought was being used was not 541511, but I thought it started with a 334.
Now, that's on products. This is app services.
Okay.
This is the app services category
Gotcha.
that
Okay.
I'm in.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
But you are correct. Products is 334210.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Now, what I did was put this slide in here, and I think they'll make these available to you, but this just gives you a list of the the awardees, along with the contract numbers. And this is available on our website as well. So we have 12 awardees on the small business contract and 20 on the full and open contract, unrestricted one. So we'll go to NetOps next. Basically the same thing. You got two IDIQ vehicle, multiple award vehicles. They were both awarded in 2015. The ceiling on the small business one, you'll note, is $5.79 billion. And for NetOps full and open, which we call NOFO, as you see up there. Of course, we give acronyms to everything, you know that, is $7.91 billion. And basically the same thing. It's one thing I didn't say on app services that I just saw. The full and open contract and the small business contract, they both have the same scope of service. The only difference that you'll see in these two contracts is that the certifications that they are required to have, but they have the same PWS. Of course, the same applies here. It's a 7-year IDIQ vehicle. The same things that I just spoke a minute ago. There's a 3-year base period and 4 1-year options if all of those are exercised. And we have 17 small business awardees on the small business, and for the full and open, we have 20. Now we're going to products. Now the products contract, it's just one contract, it's not two, and the NAICS code is 334210, and the same thing applies here. You have to use that. I know you're going to be ordering servers, networking equipment, and of course you can find a NAICS code that fits better for your instant requirement, but you got to use this 334210. And the ceiling on this one is $6.9 billion. So, and of course, it's fixed price only. And the ordering period here is it's a 3 and 3. We got a 3-year base period and 3 1-year options if all of those are exercised. And one unique thing about the products contract is that the solutions contractors, the app services, and the NetOps contractors, when they're purchasing products or proposing their solution, they purchase those products from the NetCents products contract. And the reason that they do that was put in place is because on the products contract, their standards, compliance, all that stuff is already built in. So you don't have to worry about that when you're placing your order, you know, whether or not it meets all the compliance things that you have to have in order to go on the network. These contractors are aware of it, and the products that they propose must meet those. Any questions about that? Of course, we have 25 awardees on the NetCentric Products contract. Now, you probably won't receive 25 quotes every time you put out a requirement, but you should get pretty good competition when you put out your RFQ. Yes, sir.
In the past, we've had to email extensions or RFIs. Is there any way to get one centralized email address
Yes.
for all the contractors, so we're not sending out 18 or 20 different?
For all the contractors?
Right, like if you have 18 small businesses, if we can just get one for that part of the IDIQ, where if we have to do an extension or an RFI, we can just email that one box and it goes to all the contractors versus having to send them well, not individually, but look them up individually and try to keep track of who's still with contractor A, or you get a no longer there with contractor B and you got to find them.
Okay, so let me introduce Mr. Jerry Smothers. He's our program manager for NETCENTS-2, and he's more familiar with that halfway process.
Yeah, so always glad to help out. If you will email the program manager for that series, for instance, if you're talking application services, that would be Miss Gina Howard for small business. Then she has a list, an email, contact list where you can email them all at once. You can create your own. If you go to the NetCents website, you'll see we have in the individual areas for each contract, we've listed the contract holders and their email addresses and their phone numbers. So whichever one works for you. Most people find it fairly simple to go to the NetCents website. I'm sure Francine will cover that in a few minutes, but you'll see that you have the POCs there listed, and that's usually easy to do. Does that answer your question? Right, so you would have to either create your own list based on the POCs we have on the NetCents website, or my program manager for that individual area can furnish you the email list. Halfway 4.0 is due to release out at the end of this month, and it will include some new capabilities, but most of the things that you're probably interested in are not until the Halfway 5.0 release. So that gives you the ability to do amendments within Halfway for NetCents, which is probably the root of what you're asking. And we're looking forward to that with all the capabilities that offers and the business-to-business capabilities for our vendors. But that will be Halfway 5.0. Not much help for those issues for file size extensions and things that you commonly have in Halfway for 4.0. But we do have it in the queue. Okay? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So let's talk about the CLIN structure, and I do have those behind this, but this applies to all of them. You have to issue your CLIN. Your structure must be in accordance with the IDIQ CLIN structure. You can't create your own. If it starts with 0010 as the first one, please don't issue your task order starting with 0001 that we're typically accustomed to. 1, CLIN 2, CLIN 3. It has to be the same as the IDIQ CLIN structure, okay? They cannot be used if they have not been awarded at the basic IDIQ level. So don't use, I'll show you that in a second, some that are for option year 4 or 5. You got to stick with the base year or the period that you're doing your order within. Of course, CLINs, CLINs are used to track to the ceiling, and also it tells us for that particular contract type how many orders have been issued. And we do a lot of tracking, Mr. Smothers' office. We do a lot of tracking for that at the Air Force level. They want to know that information. So, of course, you know about FPDSNG. It's dependent upon that, We need to be sure we're not, I think you've heard it before, garbage in, garbage out, but the contract systems are only as good as the information that we put in them, the information that we get back. So let's be sure we're putting the proper information in there. And of course, you can use more than one CLIN type, but except for products, products only has fixed price CLIN. Any questions? So let me go to this is the CLIN structure for small business app services. Now I've put the full CLIN structure here for you to see. And what you'll see is that we're almost near the end of the base period of app services small business. So we're going to be switching over here in June. And the CO will be exercising that option, of course. And one thing I wanted to point out about this is that we get some calls concerning that travel CLIN. Now, I don't know if they're reading the calls that we're getting, but they're quite amazed when we tell them that your travel can't be in accordance with the JTR. It has to be in accordance with FAR Part 31. And 31, that's what's allowable and unallowable. So be sure you're doing that. We do have a special clause in the contracts. You read the contract for the one that you're issuing against, clause H047. That gives you the instructions for travel. You'll notice that in option period 4, you see what we call a small business graduate data submission. Now, let me see how I'm going to say this. When recertification comes about at the 5-year period for the small businesses, those small businesses who are unable to recertify as a small business due to internal growth only, those contractors will be eligible to submit all the paperwork and be considered for competing in the full and open contract. I hope I didn't lose anybody. But if they went through a merger or anything like that, they were acquired or got eaten up by another small business, they are not eligible. But only those contractors who grew large due to internal growth. Those are the only ones that's going to be eligible. And they'll have these CLINs added to their contract at that time. Any questions about this? Because basically this is going to be the same for all of them. What you'll notice is that the small business for app services and the small business for NetOps is that they have the same CLIN structure, and the full and open for both app services and NetOps have the same CLIN structure. Please do not deviate from the awarded CLIN structure. I can't stress that enough. And getting back to those products that I talked about that the solutions contractor that they purchase from the products contract, they purchase those against CLIN, the ODC CLIN. How about that? That's where they put those. But of course, you can place those against your CLIN, fixed price CLIN, or your cost CLIN, of course. But there needs to be a distinction there. And this is a NetOps. Of course, it looks like app services. We're still in the base period. And here's a NetOps full and open. Now we get to the products CLIN structure. We have CLINs there. You can see that the description, we have networking equipment, depending on what you're buying. Servers, peripherals, multimedia, identity management, biometric, software. And when we say software, we're talking about that shrink-wrapped software, okay? If you still are mandated to use, if something falls under the DoD ESI, you should still be using that. We do not override that. But of course, if you're talking about shrink-wrapped software, you can purchase that against this contract. Any questions about this one? I think this one is pretty straightforward. Now let's get to market research. Again, I don't have that up here, but I did have it in my notes. I looked it up. The CFR says if you have a multiple award vehicle, the task orders that are issued against it have to do some market research. You still are required to do market research. Now, we put these market research is only good for 18 months. That's what FAR 10 tells us. So you still have to do some research, market research for your instant requirement. And we do have templates out on our website that you can use. I do want to stress that. We have lots of templates available for you to use. So if you'll go out there, you'll be able to use that. Are there any questions? I know you had a question about market research.
Sorry, just what type of templates did you say that you had a lot of?
What type of templates? We have We have this one, market research template. We have one out there that you can use. Yeah, how to use it. And of course, you know what market research is. If you do an RFI, or if you have an industry day or something of that type, how to write that stuff up. Yeah. But market research is everybody's responsibility. It's the CEOs as well as your program side of the house. It's not just one group. We all play into that. So subcontracting, the subcontracting plan approval, that's done at the IDIQ level. You should not be adding a subcontracting plan to your task orders. Now, what you don't see here is we have 23% that's required. If you go to the contracts, you'll be able to see it, but there's a 23% goal. And we do have a procedural that the contractors give us to show us that they are meeting this subcontracting goal. And of course, your subcontractors now. Your subcontractors for your task orders, you approve those. We don't approve your subcontractors. So getting to this limitation of subcontracting, we've had quite a few CEOs who do not like this, but this is what the law and the regulation states. It states that when you have a multiple award vehicle, that the 50%, or at least 50%, 51% rule, that applies to the IDIQ as a whole. So what we have a procedural where we roll every order that contractor gets, we roll it up at the IDIQ level to see if they're meeting that requirement. This is not at the task order level, and this goes against, and of course it went against what I was accustomed to as well. If the prime contractor is not performing at least 50% of that work, you know, at the task order level, but that doesn't apply at the task order level, it's at the IDIQ level. It's a roll-up. Some CEOs do not like that, I will tell you, but that's how it is. So we're down to, I told you that we have two separate vehicles for app services and for NetOps. So those vehicles, you know, you have the rule of two. If you have at least two small businesses who can perform, you have to compete that in the small business vehicle. So what you do here, if it's from 3,000, the micro purchase threshold, up to the SAT, of course, that's automatically reserved for small business. That's what the FAR says, and I keep stipulating that because we made no new requirements. It applies just like that. Anything over the SAT, then of course you do your market research, and you determine if there's a reasonable expectation that you're going to receive at least 2 offers from small business, then you compete that in the small business pool. But you should be always considering your small business first, because as I stated before, both of those contracts have the same scope of coverage. So unless you can find a reason that the small businesses can't perform and that you have to document why you're not going to compete in the small business pool. I know that's a lot of words up there, but in a nutshell, that's what I'm saying. And let me foot stomp this because we have had some issues with this, and the contractors have brought this to our attention that some contracting offices are competing in both pools at the same time, and you can't do that. You cannot compete it in both pools at the same time. If you competed in the small business pool and you don't get any offers or no acceptable offers, because you could get some offers and they're not acceptable once you go through your evaluation. If you do that, then you pull it and then you compete in the full and open pool, but not at the same time. Let's go back to that. Yeah, so don't forget about that 2579. You still got to do that. I'm sure your small business directors don't let you forget that either. Because on the difference in the two contracts, on NetCents 1, we had a blanket 2579 that covered you. But on NetCents 2, a lessons learned was the small business director says, hey, that's not going to fly. We want to do our own determination for each individual order, so you staff to do that for each individual order. And also, for those of you that require RAD, now we do have a blanket RAD, requirements approval documents. Now you need to check your local policies and procedures to see if you need that. But if you do, we have that available on the website for you. And we've given, the link is available there. It's posted. All you have to do is print that off and show your policy people. I used to be the chief of policy. There's a line in there where we specifically state that it covers any task orders that are going to be written. So it's for the entire dollar value. So you don't have to reaccomplish a RAD. You just need to print it off and put it on the appropriate tab. So let's talk about some of the task order procedures. All of these contracts are subject to fair opportunity. Unless everybody, that means every offer, all 20, 17, 20, whoever's in that contract pool, you have to give them an opportunity to compete, unless you have a fair opportunity exception. Now those exceptions, that's in FAR 16.5. If you'll look there, you'll see what those exceptions are. Some people go to FAR Part 6. Your task order, the task orders that are issued fall under 16.5. So you have to use one of those fair opportunity exceptions and write, of course, your J&A or whatever you have to write for your local policy. One thing I pulled out, you cannot have any unfunded task orders. You can incrementally fund, but you cannot issue any unfunded task orders. And we're counting on you in the field to go ahead, when your task orders are closed out, to go ahead and close those task orders out for us. And you know, of course, about the quick closeout procedures, that's in FAR 42. Please go ahead and do that. Of course, when you're issuing your task orders, you know, with all the emphasis that we've had lately, I've heard so much about GFP and had so much GFP training. I don't know about you, but be sure you are using, we've put those clauses in the IDIQ. They are there. Be sure your task orders include them and that you're listing out your government furnished property, any options. If you're going to put options on your task order, be sure you pull the options clauses. You got to have the option clauses on your task order. Tax clauses, any of those things. And the payment instructions, of course. Some people are counting on, they're saying, well, it's in the IDIQ. You need to put those things in your task order because it's your mini contract. The IDIQ covers a broad scope, and it's the umbrella, right? But you are writing that instant requirement that's obligating money and binding the government. So be sure that you have everything that you need in that task order. And of course, CPARs, I say CPARs, that is required for all task orders that are over $1 million. You have to do a CPAR. Now, I don't worry about them too much. Mr. Smothers looks at that. He takes care of that for us, so. But we all work together. When you're putting your RFP or your RFP out in AFWay, be sure you include a cover letter. Give them instructions. Give them clear instructions that they need to go by, when it's due, who the POC is. You won't believe how many calls that we get over on our side of the house asking us about some CO's requirement in the field. So we have to go look it up ourselves and find out who it is, because it's not ours. But be sure you put that POC information in there. Any solicitation provisions, the ones that I was just talking about, your contractors need to know that to give you a good proposal. They need to know if it's going to be GFP that they'll have, that we're providing. They need to know that. Tell them the page limits that you want them to have for their proposal to be. And make sure there's no disconnects between in your instructions to offer and your evaluation criteria. Be sure those two link up. This is what I want, and this is how I'm going to evaluate you against what I've told you to give me. So be sure that those two, it's not ambiguous. I can't say that word, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway. And of course, the evaluation criteria, past performance, pricing, and technical. And be clear in all of that. So here's this AFWay thing, and as I told you, I only have 2 slides on this. Our office stands ready to assist you. All you have to do is send us an email, NETCENTS, or pick up the phone and call us. But AFWay is your entry point. This is just like FedBizOps. This is your entry point for NETCENTS, okay? It's not a contract. Some people think that AFWay is a contract. It's not a contract. It's a web-based e-commerce solution for placing your order, for purchasing IT products. If you're asking, this is one other thing, if you're doing an RFI, put RFI in front of your description so that they'll know that this is only a request for information and not a request for a proposal. And of course, we have a user's guide. I wanted to look for a good adjective to describe our user's guide because it's very descriptive, and we've tried to put a lot of things in there that will help you. So please read that user's guide, and if you can't get an understanding from what you're reading once you have read the user's guide, don't hesitate to call us or send us an email. And of course, the program manager for this is Mr. Kevin Lee, and that is the web link, the link that you click on in order to get to NETCENTS. So, I said I had 2 slides. I must have cut it down a little bit, but anyway. Any questions about AFWay? Okay, let's talk about the GPC. You can use the GPC. If you go out on our website, we do have that 2 June 15 memo out there that talks about the expanded use of it. It came from SAF AQC. One thing you need to know is that the NETCENTS-2 contracts are not pre-priced. So there's no B tables, as we used to call them. There's no priced B tables in there, okay? Card holders, you can purchase up to your purchase limit. So from $3,000 to $25,000, whatever that may be, that's your purchase limit. And one thing I want to point out, that bullet 2, it talks about the mandatory use of NETCENTS-2. So even if it is GPC, NETCENTS-2 is mandatory use. And while it is mandatory use, we hope that you do use our contracts because it is easy to use. And we went to a lot of work to put these in place. So even though it's mandatory use. I'm a CO, and anytime you say mandatory use, it's like, I got to use it. That means I have to understand it. But we've tried to make these easy, so if you're having problems, please don't hesitate to let us know. One thing, Mr. Smothers, over in his area, we have a technical team. If you want to know, contracting officers do scope determinations. When you send that file over to policy, they want to see your scope D. And if you don't have that in the file, they send it back to you, they give you a write-up. Well, one thing that our office does over in Mr. Smothers' area is that the technical team, if you'll send that PWS into this particular email address, if you'll send it in, what the technical team will do is take your PWS and map it to whatever category PWS you are trying to use. You can use that as contracting officers to build your scope determination. That will help you. And I found that to be value added for me when I was doing my scope determinations. They'll actually tell you what this paragraph on yours equates to this paragraph in the PWS for the category that you're going for. So that's a great benefit, and I hope you take advantage of that. And of course, they maintain the user's guide, of course, with our assistance, and all of the templates. Like I said, we have tons of templates out there for the requirement side of the house. We do have PWS templates out there. We have market research templates. Please go out there and use those things. They're there to help you. And that concludes my briefing. Any questions? Y'all are an easy crowd. Mr. Smothers told me about his briefing yesterday, so I really appreciate him taking the brunt of this. So if there are no questions, this concludes my brief. Yes, sir.
Is handing me a microphone. And I'm sorry I couldn't attend yesterday. I was doing other things, hosting the event here. But it is a question that from industry that I think is pretty common. Is there at some point in the NetCents way ahead that the Air Force, SAF-AQ, or possibly the NetCents PM, plans or will consider waiving the requirement that restricts prime contractors in the small and large net ops buckets to partner in that bucket together? I know that.
Yeah, I know what he's saying.
It is, in fact, just as a sort of a sidebar, I work for a company that is a prime contractor in both small and full and open. And that was probably a strategic error on our part to bid full and open, because now we find that we can't partner with primes when it's more suitable for us to sub. And so it's somewhat restricted. Now, just wondering if that's ever been put on the table as a subject for conversation, lifting that restriction to enhance competition, essentially.
Well, I'll say this. Your last words, enhance competition, that was one of the reasons we did that. To be sure that, because what we found, and this was a lessons learned too from NetCents 1, is that on NetCents 1, we had 8 contractors. A lot of times what we found, we were only getting we were pushed into sole source situations because the contractors were all priming. The prime contractors were priming with one another. And when they primed with one another, that reduced competition. It reduced the amount of proposals that we were going to receive, that we received. And for the very reason you said we need to lift it is the very reason that we put it in place. So I have not heard any word on the contracting side. As a matter of fact, I had those slides in the briefing, and I took it out, where if you're a contractor in this pool, if contractors in the same pool cannot team together, that's what he's saying. But if they're in the small business pool, they can team with contractors in the full and open pool. But if you're on the same in the same category, and this is contractors only, they cannot team with one another. And that was to enhance competition, to ensure that we would get, if we got 17 awardees, that we would get 17 proposals, possibly. Yes, sir. Mr. Smothers, you have anything to add to that? I haven't heard anything.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that question. I'm getting a lot of feedback again today. We have some companies that have taken the strategic view that they wish to withdraw. And that seems to be a common pathway to solve that problem. So it's company by company, and then you make your decision on the best business path forward.
Any more questions? I think one last plug I do want to say is that NetCents, whatever the FAR says, guys, that's what NetCents says. You won't believe the number of calls we get like NetCents is a FAR, and it's not. We just incorporate whatever it says in the FAR. So we do a lot of basic contracting type answering of questions, but please, it's just a multiple award vehicle. Thank you.